case. Social death. Ableism. And then the anthem. Oh, maybe you're right. Case. Ugly and unrooted, born on the concrete. I was stupid, mother, I was wounded. Just another struggling stupid and praying to the rhythm of my brother shooting his gun at another lost soul spinning out of control. I was the rose that grew from the concrete, not despite the street, but from the very violent colonizing world of police, gang violence, weed, speed, grief, heat. Sometimes this world is too cold, trying to find the Latina in my soul, power by the sound of my Spanish. I realized this culture was only built of my indigenous vanquish, Pipinawa, Mauchiawa. My ancestors speak through me. Stop trying to nationalize me, man. Fuck your Spanish, cause just collateral damage. Nothing to Spanish could imagine, whether you haven't vanished. I said, mother, you haven't vanished. I find you buried under this man-made concrete, and I remember I was the rose that grew through the street, not despite them, but through them. These roots are planted in the slums, they're planted in the rhythm. My ancestors drummed to the gluck, gluck, gluck of the guns where Rolando's lost his life selling drugs on H and coffee. That's where you find me. The central question of this debate should be answering at the central question you should be answering at the end of this debate is how I survive in the face of genocide. Extended Rodriguez's piece of evidence: genocide operates through all the norms of debate in the world. This table, this computer, this room, to the paper you are flowing, to the computer you are flowing on, to the paper all of us are flowing on. The materiality of genocide debates, knowledge, and practice forecloses the question of spirituality and thus our survival. The primary question of this debate is how we move the framework of debate away from the analytic of genocide to be one of indigenous survival. That's why the role of the ballot is who best performs the pedagogy of indigenous survival in the face of genocide. Extend Lawrence to do it, starting with mine and Vito's spiritual relationship to the land that has sustained us in the face of 500 years of genocide is key to how not only we survive in this space, but all of the other creatures our mother created survive in all of these colonizing spaces. Only if we are grounded and rooted in our spiritual genocide, like our ceremony and performance of indigenous knowledge, do we survive through the knowledge it provides us. This social death thing. The fundamental question is what they can do for indigenous survival. If they can't answer this question, vote AF now. Our impact outweighs any of theirs because our genocide is a precondition to them being able to not only speak but theorize about a struggle. And no link, unless your link is particular to Vito and I's indigenous knowledge or spirituality, none of their links apply. Pull them to their own specificity. All our cards are specific and explicit to their performances. We must de-link from all Western epistemology and include critical theory as an a-priori issue for our survival. The critique is a European trap whereby the terms of European theorists are centralized against the knowledge gained by indigenous knowledge. The critique chooses to ground its epistemology in the Western philosophical tradition, contributes to colonial project only to a complete de-linking through the European canon of philosophy and thought. Can we achieve a decoloniality of being surrendering to our mother is a prerequisite to any critical change. Manila 11. Critical theory project could any avoid the content, conflict, and complicity within the West. How can critical theory be subsumed into the project of modernity, coloniality, decolonization, or with this society perhaps suggest the need to abandon the 20th century formations of critical theory projects suggest exhaustive of the project of modernity? It is necessary to extricate oneself from the linkages between rationality, modernity, and coloniality. First of all, all defending from all power which is constituted by free decisions made by free people. De-linking is then necessary because there is no way out of colonial power from within Western categories of thought. Consequently, de-linking implies epistemic disobedience rather than the constant search for newness. This is a postmodern within the chronological history or archaeology of European ideas. Epistemic disobedience takes to different places to a different being, not in Greece, but in the response to the conquest and colonization of America, the massive trade and its lead Africa's spatial sites of struggle ability, rather than to a new temporality within the same space. Decolonial thinking arises and continues brewing into conflictive dialogue within European political theory of critique was born in a trap of post-modernity. If decolonial thinking, on the contrary, builds from the indigenous languages and the memories that had to confront and incepted modernity from the memories and experiences of slavery that had to confront the settlement of the modernity in the economy and political theory. There was a general tendency to accept thinking that is constructed by European history and that its experience is delocalized. Many Enlightenment intellectuals condemned slavery, but none ceased to think of the black Africans as inferior human beings. That these prejudices and blind spots that continue in geopolitical, human, and decolonial thinking was a complete turnaround, which is to say that if they aren't starting from an indigenous, if they aren't starting with a relationship to the land, which is specific to what the Rodriguez specific to what the Lawrence and piece of evidence talks about, how what constitutes the difference between Western knowledge systems and indigenous knowledge system is our specific spirituality relationship to the land. If you're not starting with the theorization of the spiritual relationship to the land, you are embodying a Western knowledge, which is implicit, because colonial genocide does not only happen in material instances, it happens in educational instances, which is saying if you're not starting from this and you're engaging in educational genocide, indigenous knowledge is key to our survival. This is the Lawrence piece of evidence that we are not a race. The fact that you think that you can subsume us into racial studies is genocidal for you to subsume us into post-colonial thoughts where we exist as extinct mythical creatures who can be referred to only in how you see persons of color. All evidence in the context of all their evidence in the context of African Americans, there is no link here. We're literally genocided. The fact that you think that is a metaphor, that this is social death is a metaphor. No, we are constantly genocided in everyday practice to the point where they want to kill us. That's a poem that's what I talk about, and the way I see the metaphor is a diss to you. We're not all spectators of death. Some of us are targets of the violence for death, to be murdered. That's our Rodriguez piece of evidence that talks about this place is genocide, that talks about how we're not all spectators. Some of us are actually subject to evisceration from these spaces and being evicted. We are the best way to solve for any kind of oppression. And onto the concrete I was born dumb. Oh, this is ableism. Onto the concrete I was born dumb, with eyes dried out, mouth stitched from birth to make sure I didn't shout. The conquistador plugged my ears so I couldn't hear my mother's tears. My legs were bound, and yet somehow I still found a way to run. You thought these were more links, but no. I call that a link turn to your translation of a relationship with ability. Your translation is genocidal. They underestimate what disablement actually means. It's about the severing of our rootedness with our mother indigenous understanding, genocide, stealing of land, disease, and the entirety of the humanism process, because the colonizer order disables us. The only way to understand what disablement truly means is to understand it from an indigenous perspective. Mikosha 08. Specifically related to colonial power without wishing to lapse into relatives in the context of the process of disabling has to be seen as a totally dehumanizing process and must include the destruction of physical, the emotional, psychic, economical, and cultural life, appropriation of the land of indigenous peoples, and still is a particularly important part of the disabling process. In Brazil, the impact of colonial consolidation of land into large plantations dominated by single crop destroyed the previous diverse and sustainable ways of life and reduced the population to a humbling set of economic and psychological dependencies on their essentially feudal landlords. One of the keys of understanding the complexity of the disabling process may well be understanding the nature and force dependency. Thus, what's the differentiation between chronic illness and permanent disability cannot usefully explain the lived experiences of indigenous people. I'm going to read that. Thus, the Western differentiation between chronic illness and permanent disability cannot usually explain the lived experiences of indigenous people. And to analyze the experience of indigenous people in the context of establishment of a new social order of exiled and colonized people ruled over by the British, French, or Spanish bourgeoisie requires this different set of methodologies and framework for those formulated in the Northern Metropole. This also turns your education. You embody Professor Krakasi. Even in your teaching, you're still drilling at me, performing epistemic lobotomies in my decolonial knowledge. Their understanding of ableism comes from a specific geography of settler colonial universities, the Western Metropole. They impose their Western conceived discourse of ableism onto indigenous knowledge systems, which is a form of intellectual colonization, ignoring the fact that the majority of disabled are indigenous. They treat us as if we don't already have an understanding and perspective on the issue. The opposite prerequisite to criticism. We need an indigenous discourse of ableism. Mikisha 08. Placing disability in the global context requires analysis of the power relation between the global north and the global south to produce sustained profit out of disability. As the number of disabled people in developing and southern countries grow, we need a paradigm shift in thinking about disability. The new disability studies emerged out of the northern metropole is now being imported and exported to the southern metropole without reference to the work of the southern disability theorists or the southern context. This process assumes the metropole is not named. The issues matter: education, employment, care. The theory matters: normalization, social medial model, postmodern. But the where does not matter. Only its positions outside the metropole need to make their geopolitical position clear. Secondly, disability studies scholars rarely mention the violence of the global north. Yet the process of colonialism, neocolonialism, and postcolonialism have resulted in the vast numbers of impaired people in the global south. Disability is producing the violence of war that is provoked by the north. 66% of the disabled people, over 75% if underreporting is undertaken. The majority live in the majority world. Disability in the global south is firmly linked to Western, northern imperialism, centers of colonialism, globalization. The idea of racial supremacy, the idealized white male of the northern hemisphere is very much tied to the production of disability in the global south. These are not the separate phenomena. Colonialism paved the way for the disabling of people in the global south. We are now witnessing further outbursts of polio in war-torn countries such as Iraq, Kosovo, Angola, and Sudan, where immunization has been disrupted, disabling a disease that has been eradicated from the industrialization. We must recognize the ability of non-metropolitan experience with disability and challenge the terms in which the dominant theory currently constituted. There's a risk that they perpetuate the intellectual colonization of the ground, or they risk that they are not studying from indigenous law. That turns into all forms of colonization and disable indigenous populations. The app is only the way to solve for indigenous disability through healing, because our relationship is different way from the indigenous knowledge is our argument of spirituality. And on the anthro, our whole argument is about our relationship to our mother. If they don't have a card that says indigenous cultures and anthropocentric, that their link arguments are where we derived from a world we have disappeared. That is literally the impact of that is genocide. And let me go here. none of their projects specific to when they see the Lawrence and Dewitt's talks about indigenous knowledge in terms of land, in terms of our spirituality with the relationship to land and what the mother can give us. This is not in a humanizing perspective. The Lawrence and Dewitt piece of evidence specifically talks about how it's an ontological, epistemological, and cosmological view. This is not a humanist perspective. Lawrence and Dewitt answers particular of this issue of humanity, but relationship to land, our whole concern is with the land and the creatures that arise from the land. This is why our relationships are different. And you're right. Everything only translates us in terms of Westernism. We're not that in trying to flip the non-human and human dividing. We're too implicit in the binary respect. The animal, the sky, and earth as different forms of ancestors carry their own wisdom and knowledge. This turns all of your link arguments because you impose your colonial relationship with our mother onto us.
All right. Ready? Okay. So your piece of Mignolo evidence that you read says that prejudices and blind spots continue in geopolitics and knowledge. What is a blind spot?
It's excluding indigenous knowledge.
No, in the context of your Mignolo evidence, what is a blind spot?
Is a failure of the Western intellectual tradition to recognize the spiritual relationship to the land. Okay. Because
so,
it's all disembodied.
Yeah,
that's why it's missing the connection to the land.
Yeah, I have another question then.
Wait, no. So the only way to be embodied, to be able to
be seen,
have vision about
No. See, like even blind indigenous peoples have this connection to the land. That's what you're not getting.
Yeah, I have.
It's all spiritual. It's not just occulocentrism or physical.
I have another question. If it's true that if it's true, like the thesis of a piece of evidence that you read,
which
that,
one?
I don't have the name right now, but that colonization leads to more disabilities in indigenous people, which is true. If this argument is true,
it doesn't lead to more. It has led to the disability for indigenous
colonization is in correlation to the disabling of the global South.
Right.
And this piece of evidence is contextualized in the theorizing of.
Okay, go ahead. I want to finish my question. So, if that argument is true, then why the metaphors?
Sir, those are.
If what argument is true?
If the argument that I just asked the question about, that.
What argument? Because we clarified it, but then you continue to say if it is true, but I'm not.
Your argument that your piece of quiche evidence, that says that your act is a prerequisite to the criticism. If that argument is true, then why the metaphors? Why say blind spot?
We have a different relation. That's what you failed to understand. You were posing Western colonial thought onto us. We have a different relationship to the ability because colonialism has led to our distinct disability. So the fact that you can impose that Western ideology onto us is the violence of genocide. We exist outside of the colonial world.
I have another question. What about equating knowledge with sight is Western?
We're saying like a blind spot, right?
Right.
Say without that feeling, we're saying that feeling is seen.
Have you ever felt the ability of being blind?
Look.
Yeah.
Yeah. So how can you make the assumption that it is okay to tell someone who is blind that there is a certain metaphor that is okay to be used?
For my culture, the Igorokakone, they say that without this feeling that you're blind. Like literally, spiritually, there is no distinction. Like these are interconnected ideas.
This is the whole issue with your theorization is that it's imposing Western problems, Western ideologies onto us. We exist outside of that.
What the problem of disability is a Western one?
No, your conceptualization.
The way you theorize about it, which is what that piece of evidence is specific to. That you take.
That gets back to my other question. What about not being able to see and not using visual metaphors is Western?
It's the way that you theorize about it.
Okay.
I'll take that.